Hey everyone, welcome as we continue our study through the New Testament, looking at the New Testament church. And we're still in the book of Acts, looking at Paul's journey from Jerusalem to Rome. And we're going to continue to follow this all the way through the end of Acts. And then we'll get into the other books that Paul wrote after that time. So we're doing this in chronological order. So this is the from the best guess, the best we can see, the way things laid out, everything laid out. And so our idea, our hope is to, as you see it in chronological order, you kind of get a better understanding, a better idea of everything as it happened. And so if you've been following along with us, Paul's been arrested. He was seen before people. There was a plan to kill him. And so now he's being sent to Caesarea. So we're going to read Acts 23 through 25, or 35, sorry, and then we'll look at some of our notes. It says, Then the commander called two of his officers and ordered, Get 200 soldiers ready to leave for Caesarea at 9 o'clock tonight. Also take 200 spearmen and 70 mounted troops. Provide horses for Paul to ride and get him safely to Governor Felix. Then he wrote this letter for the governor. From Claudius, to His Excellency Governor Felix, greetings. This man was seized by some Jews, and they were about to kill him when I arrived with the troops. When I learned that he was a Roman citizen, I removed him to safety. Then I took him to their high councils to try and learn the basis of their accusations against him. I soon discovered the charge was something regarding their religious law, certainly nothing worthy of imprisonment or death. But when I was informed of a plot to kill him, I immediately sent him on to you. I have told his accusers to bring their charges before you. So that night, as ordered, the soldiers took Paul as far as Antipatris. They returned to the fortress the next morning, while the mounted troops took him on to Caesarea. When they arrived in Caesarea, they presented Paul in the letter to Governor Felix. He read it and then asked Paul what province he was from. Caesarea, Paul answered, I will hear your case myself when your accusers arrive, the governor told him. Then the governor ordered him kept in the prison at Herod's headquarters. And so what we see here, right, and we kind of talked about this at the end of yesterday's as well. A mounted escort, a serious mounted escort was used to take Paul to the Roman governor Felix. Over 400 soldiers to make sure that he got there safely, and to the Roman headquarters there in Judea. There would have been greater protection there, right, than in Jerusalem when you're looking at this, right? Because they had a limited setup, a little limited amount of soldiers and stuff in Jerusalem, and there were a lot more Jewish people there. But here, where the headquarters was for the Romans in Judea, for all of Judea, then it would have been crazy for them to try to attack there, and so they knew that. And so we see that this little operation was executed at night. It was done with secrecy and efficiency in order to keep them from finding and trying to kill Paul. So basically, Felix was the governor of Judea. He was there, the governor, from about AD 52 to AD 59, from what we can tell. And he was responsible for both military and civil affairs. He had a bad reputation. We're going to see that in Acts 24 when we get there. And he was actually eventually recalled to Rome by Nero. And so this letter, right, to the governor, it's a typical what they call Hellenistic letter. It named the writer, like the person addressed, offered a greeting and stating the business's hand. And so it was this basic professional letter. It didn't have a parting word of farewell in it, anything like that. But it basically, it summarizes the events that took place and explains the action taken. So it was, a formal letter of why this is happening, why I've sent this guy here, everything that went on. It also applies in there that the commander was following proper Roman judicial proceedings as well, since Paul was a Roman citizen. He's like, I've learned this. I'm, protecting him, and so we're doing the best we can to protect him. And so the title that he put in there, His Excellency, was applied to persons of high status, especially social or political status or economic status. And so the governor then, following the proper protocol, waited for Paul's accusers to arrive before granting an official hearing that would have taken place. And so that he would have been held up in Herod's headquarters This was the Herod the Great's palace at Caesarea, and which eventually became the residence of the Roman governors of Judea. They ended up taking that over, and so again, with a lot of these, right, especially what we're going through, it's not super deep theological stuff. This is more history than it is anything, but it's good to see this because, you know, I like the fact that we have a lot of history in the book, especially like the Book of Acts and some of these other ones, because we can then, use that as an argument of the legitimacy of these books and say, hey, look, Luke was writing this, Luke studied this, Luke talked to everyone, Luke was there with a lot of this, and so Luke would have traveled with Paul during this time, even during the escort. Now Luke wasn't in jail with him. Luke, we'll see some of this as we go on, but it gives legitimacy to it whenever the history lines up, right? Everything, like, and if he wrote this and said, oh, this person, and then we go back in history and say, oh, this person didn't exist, or this person was, not governor then, and or all these things, but what I love about it is with all these historical facts, they line up with things that actually happen, and so it gives a little more legitimacy to Acts, to the writers of the Bible, and all that. And so I love seeing that. And so again, I know a lot of this isn't deep. It just is what it is with a lot of it, but it's history, and so it's the history of the church, and so we need to study it, and it helps give an insight to Paul, who he was, and the things that he had to go through later, especially later on in his ministry. So, as always, appreciate everyone who takes time to watch these. Hope you're learning from them. I encourage you to subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so yet. But as always, thank you for watching, and I hope y'all have a wonderful day.